The deception. The massive space station known as Harmony Point drifted in the neutral zone between empires, a gleaming testament to failed diplomacy from a dozen previous wars. Today, it would host what the galaxy believed to be humanity's surrender negotiations with the mighty Kraxan Empire. Supreme Overlord Thrax stood on the command deck of his dreadnought, the inevitable Victory, watching the station through eyes that had seen 40 conquered species kneel before him. The Kraxans were not a subtle race. Their ships, black as the void itself with crimson energy signatures pulsing along their hulls, surrounded Harmony Point in what they called a ceremonial formation. 1,000 warships, each bristling with plasma cannons and neutron torpedoes, created an impenetrable sphere around the station. It was both a show of force and a trap, though Thrax saw no need to hide his intentions. When dealing with prey, there was no shame in displaying one's fangs. His second-in-command, War Master Grex, approached with heavy footsteps that echoed across the metallic floor. The Kraxans stood 9 feet tall on average, their bodies covered in natural armor plating that had evolved over millions of years on their harsh homeworld. Forearms ended in razor-sharp claws, and their faces bore no resemblance to anything humans would call friendly. Where humans had evolved for cooperation and creativity, Kraxans had evolved for one thing only: conquest. The human delegation approaches. Supreme Overlord, Grex announced, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very air. A single diplomatic shuttle and 3 escort frigates. They come as lambs to the slaughter. Thrax's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter. 3 frigates against our 1,000 ships. Either humans are more foolish than our intelligence suggests, or they truly have accepted their fate. How many cycles has it been since they first resisted our expansion? 7 cycles, Supreme Overlord. They have fought harder than expected for such a young species. Their colonies on the outer rim held for longer than predicted. No matter. Today, humanity joins the collective. Their resources will fuel our next expansion. Their technology, primitive as it is, will be absorbed. Their population will serve the Empire. Thrax turned from the viewport, his forearms clasped behind his back in a gesture of supreme confidence, and their spirit, that annoying tendency to resist, will finally be broken. Meanwhile, aboard the human diplomatic shuttle Olive Branch, Ambassador James Harrison adjusted his formal suit and reviewed his notes one final time. At 62 years old, Harrison had spent most of his life in diplomatic service, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. His assistant, a young woman named Chen Wei, looked at him with concern evident in her dark eyes. "Ambassador, are you certain about this? Walking into that station is walking into a trap. Everyone knows the Kraxans don't negotiate in good faith." Harrison smiled, the expression creating crow's feet around his tired blue eyes. "My dear Chen, sometimes the best way to spring a trap is to walk right into it with your eyes open. The Kraxans expect us to be sheep. They've conquered dozens of species by intimidation alone, but they've made one critical error in their assessment of humanity." "What's that, sir?" "They think we're prey. They're about to learn we're persistence predators who learned to throw rocks at things that scared us until they stopped moving." Harrison stood, straightening his tie. "Besides, I won't be alone in there. I have the full backing of the United Earth Defense Force." Chen looked out the shuttle window at the 3 small frigates accompanying them. 3 ships aren't much backing, Ambassador." "Appearances can be deceiving, Chen. Remember that." Harrison's hand briefly touched a small device in his pocket, no bigger than a coin. "Now let's go make history." Harmony Point's docking bay was cavernous, designed to accommodate species of various sizes. As Harrison and his small team of 5 diplomats entered, they were immediately dwarfed by the 100 Kraxan warriors who lined their path to the conference chamber. Each warrior stood motionless, weapons visible but not directly aimed, creating a corridor of implied threat that would have sent most species running. Harrison walked through them as if taking a stroll through a park, even nodding politely to some of the warriors as he passed. Behind him, his team struggled to match his calm demeanor, but they followed his lead. They had been chosen for this mission specifically because they could control their fear, even in the face of overwhelming danger. The conference chamber itself was a study in intimidation architecture. The ceiling soared 50 feet high, with the Kraxan delegation seated on elevated platforms that forced the humans to look up at them. Supreme Overlord Thrax occupied the highest throne, his forearms spread wide in what might have been a greeting or a threat display. Ambassador Harrison of Earth. Thrax's voice boomed through the chamber. You have come to discuss terms of your species' integration into the Kraxan Empire. Harrison smiled pleasantly. Supreme Overlord Thrax, thank you for agreeing to these negotiations. I come with full authority to speak for United Earth and all human colonies. Good. Then we can make this brief. The terms are simple. Complete surrender of all human military assets. Integration of all human worlds into the Empire within one cycle. 30% of your population to be conscripted for military service. Your technology and resources become property of the Empire. In exchange, the remaining humans will be allowed to live as protected subjects. The Kraxan delegation made sounds of approval, their mandibles clicking in unison. They had given these same terms to dozens of species. Some had negotiated for slightly better conditions, but all had eventually accepted. The alternative was annihilation. Harrison pulled out a datapad and pretended to review it carefully. These are comprehensive terms, Supreme Overlord. May I ask a few clarifying questions? Speak. The 30% conscription rate, is that of total population or just adults? Total population. You're young, mature quickly enough to be useful. Harrison nodded, making notes. And the integration timeline of one cycle, that's roughly 18 of our months? Correct. I see. And if we were to refuse these terms? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Every Kraxan warrior shifted slightly, claws extending just a fraction. Thrax leaned forward, his bulk casting a shadow over the human delegation. Then your species will be designated for termination. Your worlds will burn. Your cities will be reduced to ash. We will hunt down every human in the galaxy until your species is nothing but a footnote in the Empire's history. The choice is simple, Ambassador. Servitude or extinction. Harrison stood in silence for a long moment, seeming to weigh his options. Then he did something that not a single being in the room expected. He laughed. Not a nervous laugh or a laugh of despair, but a genuine, amused laugh, as if he'd just heard an excellent joke. I apologize, Supreme Overlord, Harrison said, wiping his eyes. It's just, you really don't know anything about humans, do you? You've studied our colonies, our outer defenses, our visible military assets, but you haven't studied us. Our history. Our nature. Thrax's forearms tensed. Explain yourself, human. We're not herbivores who evolved to run from predators. We're not even regular predators who evolved to chase prey. We're persistence predators, Supreme Overlord. Our ancestors would chase prey for hours, days even, until it collapsed from exhaustion. We didn't need to be the fastest or the strongest. We just needed to never stop coming. Your point, Ambassador? Harrison reached into his pocket and pulled out the small device. My point is that you've made a critical strategic error. You've brought your entire fleet here, concentrated in one location, arranged in a ceremonial formation that looks impressive but is tactically vulnerable. You've assumed we would walk into your trap without setting one of our own. He pressed the device. Outside, space itself seemed to ripple. What had appeared to be empty void suddenly filled with ships. Not just a few ships, not just a fleet, but an entire armada. 2,000 human vessels materialized from behind advanced stealth technology that had taken decades to perfect. They had been there for hours, powered down to minimal systems, waiting in the darkness like their ancient ancestors had once waited in tall grass for prey to get comfortable. The human ships were smaller than their Kraxan counterparts on average, but they were built for something the Kraxans had never really needed to perfect: asymmetric warfare. Every vessel bristled with weapons designed not for conquest, but for desperate survival against a superior foe. Railguns that could punch through armor, missile systems with payloads of self-replicating nanobots, electronic warfare suites that could turn enemy ships against each other. Admiral Catherine Storm stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, humanity's first true dreadnought. At 45, she was young for such a command, but she had earned it through brilliant tactics during the outer colony defenses. Her green eyes were cold as space itself as she gave the order that would change the course of galactic history. All ships, this is Admiral Storm. Operation Trojan Horse is go. Fire at will. Show them what happens when you back humanity into a corner. The revelation. The first salvo caught the Kraxan fleet completely off guard. Railgun rounds traveling at significant fractions of light speed punched through shields and armor, as if they were tissue paper. Missile swarms erupted from human vessels, each missile splitting into dozens of smaller warheads that sought weak points in enemy vessels. Electronic warfare attacks flooded cracks in communication channels with everything from human music to corrupted code that made their targeting systems see ghosts. On the inevitable victory, Supreme Overlord Thrax watched in stunned disbelief as his ceremonial formation, meant to intimidate, became a liability. His ships were too close together, unable to maneuver without risking collision. They had powered down weapons for the ceremony, requiring precious seconds to bring them back online, seconds they didn't have. "All ships, battle stations!" Thrax roared. "Return fire. Destroy the human fleet!" But it was chaos. The Kraxan fleet, for all its numerical superiority and firepower, had been caught flat-footed. Ships trying to break formation collided with each other. Friendly fire incidents erupted as panicked gunners shot at anything moving. The humans had turned the Kraxans' own advantages against them. War Master Grek stumbled as another impact rocked the dreadnought. "Supreme Overlord, we've lost communication with half the fleet. The humans are jamming our systems with some kind of adaptive virus. Our point defense systems are targeting our own fighters." "Impossible. Our technology is superior." "Not impossible," came a calm human voice over the communication system. Admiral Storm's image appeared on the main screen, her expression deadly serious. "Just human. You see, Supreme Overlord, we've been preparing for this moment for 7 years. Every battle, every skirmish, every raid, we've been studying you, learning your tactics, your technology, your psychology." The Vengeance unleashed its main weapon, a spinal-mounted mass driver that ran the entire length of the ship. The tungsten rod it fired was simple, primitive by galactic standards, but accelerated to 20% the speed of light. It hit with the force of a nuclear weapon. The Kraxan battleship Unconquerable split in half, its death witnessed by both fleets. "You thought we were fighting to defend our colonies," Storm continued. "We were actually running experiments, testing weapons, gathering intelligence. Every colonist who died, every ship we lost, they all knew they were buying time for this moment." In the conference chamber on Harmony Point, Harrison hadn't moved from his position, even as alarms blared and the station shook from nearby explosions. His team stood behind him, fear replaced by grim determination. They had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not survive it, but also knowing they were the bait that would draw the Kraxan leadership into the open. "You wanted to know our terms, Supreme Overlord?" Harrison said to the image of Thrax on the chamber's screen. "Here they are. Immediate cessation of all expansion. Withdrawal from the 17 systems you've conquered in the last century. Release of all enslaved populations. Dismantling of 60% of your military infrastructure. You dare make demands? We still outnumber you." "Not for long," Harrison replied calmly. As if to punctuate his words, the Kraxan carrier Pride of Conquest erupted in a series of internal explosions. The nanobots from human missiles had infiltrated its systems, turning the ship's own power core into a bomb. More Kraxan vessels followed, consumed from within by weapons the Empire had never encountered before. Captain Marcus Rodriguez commanded the destroyer UES Remember the Alamo, a ship name that confused alien allies but resonated with every human who knew their history. His ship was small, fast, and punched well above its weight class. He drove it straight into the heart of the Kraxan formation, all weapons firing. "For every colony you burned, for every human you enslaved, for every child you orphaned," Rodriguez muttered as his ship's missiles found their targets. "This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." The battle raged for 6 hours. The Kraxans, once they recovered from their initial shock, fought with the ferocity that had conquered 17 species. Their weapons were powerful, their warriors brave, their technology advanced. But they were fighting an enemy they had fundamentally misunderstood. Humans didn't fight like prey. They didn't even fight like most predators. They fought like something evolution had shaped on a death world where everything tried to kill them. And they had survived by being more stubborn than death itself. When a Kraxan ship destroyed a human vessel, its sister ships would immediately focus fire on the attacker. When Kraxan boarding parties managed to breach human ships, they found crews who fought with improvised weapons and a fury that bordered on madness. Lieutenant Sarah Kim led the defense of the UES Thermopylae when Kraxan warriors breached their hull. Outnumbered 10-1, her security team held the corridor for 45 minutes using everything from rifles to jury-rigged explosive devices made from cleaning supplies. When asked later how they held so long, she simply said, "We're human. Spite is our superpower." The turning point came when Admiral Storm executed the maneuver that would be studied in military academies for generations. She had noticed that the Kraxan fleet, despite its disorder, was trying to reform around the inevitable victory to protect their supreme overlord. It was a predictable move, born from a society that valued hierarchy above all else. All ships execute Pattern Omega, Storm commanded. Let's show them what coordinated chaos looks like. The human fleet seemed to scatter randomly, ships fleeing in all directions. The Kraxans, seeing what looked like a rout, pressed their advantage. They pursued, spreading out their formation to chase down the fleeing humans. It was exactly what Storm had anticipated. The human retreat was actually a complex maneuver that positioned their ships at optimal firing angles around the Kraxan fleet. On Storm's signal, every human vessel fired simultaneously at pre-calculated coordinates. The crossfire was devastating. Kraxan ships found themselves caught between multiple angles of attack with nowhere to hide. The inevitable victory itself shuddered under the combined assault of dozens of human vessels. Its shields, the most powerful in the Kraxan fleet, held for exactly 93 seconds before collapsing. Then the human weapons found their mark. Engines went offline. Weapon systems failed. Life support began to falter. Supreme Overlord Thrax stood on his crippled bridge, watching his empire's greatest fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had dismissed as prey. His forearms hung limp at his sides, his mandibles silent. War Master Grex lay dead at his feet, killed by an exploding console. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to restore systems, but it was hopeless. Supreme Overlord, his communications officer said quietly, "The humans are requesting direct communication." Thrax looked at the tactical display. Half his fleet was gone. The other half was either crippled or trapped. The human losses were significant but far lighter than they should have been. The trap he had set had become his tomb. "Put them through," he said, his voice hollow. Admiral Storm appeared on screen again, and this time Ambassador Harrison stood beside her, having been evacuated from Harmony Point during the battle. Both humans looked tired but determined. "Supreme Overlord Thrak," Harrison began formally, "the Kraxan Empire has lost this engagement. Your fleet is broken, your expansion is ended, but humanity offers you something your empire has never offered its conquered foes. A choice." "Speak," Thrax managed. "Accept our terms. Withdraw from your conquered systems. Free your enslaved populations. Reduce your military. In exchange, we offer something invaluable: partnership. The galaxy doesn't need another empire built on conquest. It needs a coalition built on cooperation. Your strength and our innovation, working together instead of against each other." "And if we refuse," Storm answered this time, "then we'll do what humans have always done when faced with an existential threat. We'll persist. We'll follow your remaining ships back to your homeworld. We'll free your slaves ourselves. We'll dismantle your empire piece by piece. And we won't stop until the job is done, no matter how long it takes. Because that's what persistence predators do." Thrax looked at the humans on his screen, really looked at them for the first time, not as prey, not as subjects to be conquered, but as equals, perhaps even as superiors in the ways that mattered. They had turned his strength against him, made his advantages into weaknesses, and done it all while offering him a way out that preserved some honor. "I need time to consider," Thrax said. "You have 1 hour," Harrison replied. "After that, Admiral Storm resumes her attack. And Supreme Overlord, this fleet she commands? It's only a third of our total forces. The rest are already moving toward your core systems. The choice is yours, evolution or extinction." The screen went dark. Thrax stood in the red emergency lighting of his broken bridge, surrounded by the debris of his shattered assumptions. For 40 years, he had believed in the supremacy of strength, the righteousness of conquest, the destiny of the Kraxan Empire to rule the galaxy. Now, faced with an enemy that had turned his own nature against him, he began to understand a truth that humans had learned long ago. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to fight. Sometimes the greatest victory is choosing cooperation over domination. 45 minutes later, Supreme Overlord Thrax, leader of the Kraxan Empire, conqueror of 17 species, accepted humanity's terms. The Age of Empire was ending. The Age of Coalition was about to begin, and somewhere in the void, Admiral Catherine Storm allowed herself a small smile. They had walked into the trap, sprung the trap, and turned the trap inside out, not through superior firepower or technology, but through the most human quality of all, the ability to turn desperate situations into unexpected opportunities. The battle for Harmony Point was over. The war for the galaxy's future had just begun, but for the first time in 7 years, humanity wasn't fighting alone. They had done something no other species had managed. They had turned their would-be conquerors into their future allies. All it had taken was showing the galaxy what happened when you backed humanity into a corner and expected them to accept defeat. Humans didn't accept defeat. They persisted. They endured, and when necessary, they showed the universe that the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest teeth or the sharpest claws. It's the one that never, ever gives up. End of story.